You're not weak for thinking about them constantly. You're not crazy, and it's not just overthinking. There's a reason their presence keeps echoing through your days, hijacking your nights, and showing up in the most intimate corners of your mind. This isn't an obsession rooted in fantasy. It's a trauma pattern etched into your nervous system like a song that never resolved its final note. Because their memory doesn't just live in your mind, it lives in your breath, in the way your shoulders tense, in the way your pulse shifts when you hear their name, in the way your body still prepares for an emotional event that already passed, but never ended. The ache isn't just emotional, it's cellular. What you keep calling thinking about them may actually be your body remembering its own interruption. Love interrupted, expression interrupted, safety interrupted. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Obsessive rumination is not indulgence. It's the psyche's desperate attempt to find meaning inside what it couldn't complete. When loss or rejection overwhelmed your system, time froze, the moment locked itself inside you, and their image became an autonomous complex, repeating itself until the wound is brought into light. As Bruce Lipton reminds us, the subconscious isn't just mental, it's somatic. Your beliefs, your imprints, your traumas, they live in the cells of your body. Intense emotional bonds, when unresolved, don't just disappear. They echo, they imprint, they vibrate through your nervous system like a cord left unresolved. You're not broken, you're still carrying the energetic residue of a connection that your body hasn't yet discharged. And this video isn't about getting over them. It's about decoding the truth underneath the loop. What if your obsessive thoughts aren't calling you back to them, but back to you, to the part of you that was abandoned with them, to the part of your body that still believes it's unsafe without them, to the part of your soul still waiting for someone to stay. So the invitation is this: stop trying to silence the thoughts. Start listening to the wound, because maybe what you're obsessing over isn't the person at all. It's the version of you that never got to finish the story. There is a kind of ache that disguises itself as longing, a longing that seems to whisper, "I miss them," but beneath that whisper lives another voice, quieter, more ancient, saying, "I miss feeling safe." They entered your life like a spark, sudden, bright, disarming. You felt something awaken, not because they were your piece, but because your nervous system began to dance again, between hope and fear, intimacy and withdrawal, presence and uncertainty. Somewhere inside that dance, your body began to tether its sense of aliveness to their presence. The rush of connection, the unpredictability, the intensity. It mimicked something that once felt like love, but what it actually resembled was survival. You told yourself, "They made me feel alive." But aliveness born from anxiety is not vitality. It's a nervous system spike. It's a surge of cortisol mistaken for chemistry. The body cannot always distinguish between passion and dysregulation. It only knows sensation. And when sensation comes in high waves, it often gets mistaken for deep truth. So now, in their absence, you think it's them you miss. But your body is remembering the rhythm of instability. It became wired for the chase, not the connection. It formed a loop: anticipation, reward, withdrawal, collapse, repeat. This is not a conscious addiction, it's a physiological memory. Your nervous system learned to chase the spark, even when it burned. Like mistaking a lightning storm for light, your body confused intensity with intimacy, and when they left or pulled away, the stillness felt like death. But it wasn't death. It was the absence of the high. The ache that remains is not love left behind. It's the withdrawal from emotional adrenaline. And in that quiet collapse, your system cries not for the person, but for the safety it never truly had. That's what you miss. The illusion of security, the fantasy of finally being held, the nervous system's memory of a moment that almost felt like home. But almost home is not home. And someday, your body will learn to tell the difference. There is a subtle violence in the way the mind dismisses the body, as if obsession could be reasoned away, as if the thoughts that return each night were just habits to be broken, rather than echoes of something the body still carries. It's tempting to believe the ache is mental, to treat the spirals of longing like faulty logic, to try to overwrite memories with affirmations, to repeat phrases like, "It's over, move on, let go." But the body doesn't speak this language. The body remembers in sensation, in the tightness across your chest when a familiar song plays, in the sudden breathlessness when you hear their name, in the way your jaw clenches when you pass the place where they once stood. This is not a thinking problem. This is a nervous system memory. When they entered your life, their presence may have stirred something ancient, a deep preverbal recognition, something bigger than thought, something cellular. And when that connection fractured through absence, rejection, or silence, your system was left holding energy too large to metabolize. There was no time, no guidance, no ritual for release, just a silent implosion. So now the thoughts come not as choices, but as echoes, mental loops trying to process what the body could not complete. This is why logic often fails, because healing is not an idea. It's a process of remembering the forgotten tongue of the body. As Jung understood, the psyche speaks in symbols, but the soma, the body, speaks in symptoms. Trembling hands, shallow breath, a sudden memory with no narrative, only sensation. Bruce Lipton reminds us, the subconscious lives not in the conscious mind, but in the tissues, in the body's automatic patterns, in the places we flinch without knowing why. To believe it's just mental is to abandon the part of you that's still frozen in that final moment. The body doesn't move on because the mind decided it was time. It moves when it feels safe. It softens when it is witnessed. The mind is the echo chamber. But the body is the bell, and it has been ringing for far longer than you realized. There are people who enter not to love us, but to reflect us, not the self we show, but the self we buried, the one we left behind in some forgotten hallway of childhood. And when they arrive, something stirs. Not joy exactly, not safety, but recognition. A nervous system stirred by a familiar feeling, the ache of being near someone who sees you but doesn't stay. Someone whose silence reminds you of an older silence. Someone whose presence reawakens the original exile. This isn't romantic, it's archetypal. The unconscious seeks its missing parts through projection. It reaches for healing through the repetition of pain. And so the heart becomes confused. It calls the pattern love, when what it's really naming is the return of a wound. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we disown. And often the person we obsess over is not a soulmate, but a carrier of that shadow. You may not have fallen in love. You may have fallen into recognition, into the echo of a parent's distance, a caregiver's coldness, an early need that never found its answer. And the obsession now isn't about them. It's about trying to rewrite that early story, to get it right this time, to be seen, chosen, stayed for. But no one can complete the wound that belongs to the past. And no one can hold the inner child who still waits for resolution, except the soul that once abandoned her. It's like hugging a ghost in your own childhood home. They are not there, and they never truly were. What you touched was a memory. There are moments in life that never end, not because time stops, but because the body does. When love begins, the nervous system opens, the body leans forward, the breath deepens, hope rises, and then, without warning, comes the fracture, a silence, a sudden coldness, a withdrawal that feels like a disappearing act. And in that instant, something in you stopped moving. Not just your thoughts, your whole being. This is the freeze, the most invisible of the trauma responses. Not fight, not flight, but stillness that feels like death. You may not remember it clearly because freezing isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's the nervous system playing dead when it no longer knows how to stay safe. And so your body did what it had to do. It silenced itself to survive the disorientation of sudden disconnection. You didn't run. You didn't speak. You didn't scream or beg or explain. You just stopped. And now, long after they've gone, you find yourself spiraling in thoughts. Not because you're obsessed, but because your body is still trying to finish a moment it never got to complete. The loop is not about memory. It's about interruption. The kind that traps you mid-flight, wings open, heart exposed, still waiting for a landing that never came. Jung saw trauma not just as pain, but as the splitting of psychic time. When something overwhelming happens, the psyche cannot integrate it fully, so it returns, in dreams, in images, in sensations. It circles back until the body is safe enough to feel again, and Bruce Lipton's insight echoes this. The body, in its intelligence, holds onto the past until it receives new instructions, not from the intellect, but from compassion. The thought of them is not obsession, it's the nervous system calling for completion, for restoration, for the final gesture that was never made. And perhaps this is why you think of them when it's quiet, because the part of you that froze still believes that time has not moved on. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. There are words that sound like wisdom, but land like dismissal. Few are more quietly cruel than the phrase, just let go. To a mind seeking logic, it makes sense. Release the thought, move on, rewrite the story. But to a body still carrying grief, those words fall like ice on a wound, still warm and open. Letting go is not a choice the mind makes in a moment of clarity. It is a biological unfolding, slow, sacred, and cellular. It cannot be forced because the body does not respond to instruction. It responds to safety. When a bond forms under intensity, especially one unresolved, it embeds itself deep within the nervous system. It becomes not just a memory, but a mapping. A place the body returns to again and again, trying to make sense of what was never integrated. Bruce Lipton reminds us emotional experiences, when repeated or traumatic, become subconscious programs stored not in thoughts, but in tissues. To release them isn't to forget, it's to metabolize. But when spiritual language bypasses this truth, telling the nervous system to let go becomes a command it cannot obey. And in failing to obey, the psyche turns against itself, calling its grief a failure, its obsession a weakness. What the body actually needs is to digest the experience, to feel it fully in a space where the old fear is no longer active, to breathe through what was once unbearable. Only then does the system know the moment is over. Otherwise, the grief doesn't dissolve. It burrows. It transforms into longing that has no home, into a thought that returns at 2 a.m., into the voice that whispers, "You're still not over it." But that isn't obsession. It's smoke, and the fire is still inside. Letting go cannot begin with willpower. It begins when the body feels what it was never allowed to feel and finds that it can survive it. Because to truly let go is not to push away the past. It is to finally exhale what the body has been holding all this time. There are bonds we don't choose, not consciously. They are formed not from compatibility, but from intensity, from the weight of what was felt, not the wisdom of what was known. When the nervous system experiences emotional activation without resolution, it forms a kind of imprint, a looping pattern that does not ask for permission. It simply embeds itself, like ivy wrapping itself around a tree it was never meant to climb. This is not romance. This is biology. Trauma bonds are not rooted in love. They are rooted in survival. In the nervous system's attempt to find safety, even if what it attaches to is unstable. You may have felt chosen, seen, known. But beneath that connection, your body may have sensed something older, a familiar chaos, a rhythm that mirrored your childhood, the unpredictable warmth of someone who could disappear at any moment. And so your system did what it was designed to do. It mapped safety onto their presence, even if that presence was inconsistent, confusing, or painful. Carl Jung would call this a complex, an inner psychic figure tied to projection, emotional memory, and unresolved longing. It takes on a life of its own, autonomous, recurring, charged with feeling. And Bruce Lipton's work offers a mirror to this insight. The subconscious, shaped by early patterns and emotional repetition, builds its reality not through reason, but through cellular memory. So when someone awakens a bond inside you, you may believe it is destiny. But often it is just familiarity, the nervous system trying to return to a place it once called home. Even if that home was built in chaos, you didn't choose to obsess. The pattern chose you. Through repetition, through biology, through memory. But what once formed without your consent can now be witnessed with compassion, and every moment of awareness begins to loosen the threads. The goal is not to cut the cord with force, but to gently untie the vine. To tell the nervous system you no longer have to cling to what once felt like safety, and slowly the tree begins to breathe again. Some thoughts return so often they begin to feel sacred, the way you remember their smile, the way you replay the silence between you, the way you ask again and again, was it meant to be? But what if this isn't destiny speaking? What if it's the echo of an unresolved moment, still living in the folds of your nervous system, still waiting to be seen? Obsession can feel like fate, especially when the body is holding a memory it never got to release. Carl Jung wrote that until we bring the unconscious into the light, we will call it fate. And this is the illusion of somatic memory, that because the feeling is strong, it must be true, that because they appear in your dreams, because your breath shifts at their name, because your body responds without warning, they must be soul-tied to you. But not everything that returns is meant to stay, and not everything that lingers is love. Bruce Lipton teaches that cellular memory is formed through repetition and emotional charge. Your body remembers not only what happened, but how you felt when it happened. And when the feeling is incomplete, the loop remains open. So the thoughts that come now, the ones that strike like waves without warning, they are not signs from the universe. They are signs from within, not about them, but about you, about what your body was never allowed to express, about the version of you that stayed frozen while life moved forward. Somatic memory is powerful. It can convince you that you're still in the story, when in truth, only your nervous system is. And healing begins not by pulling away from the thought, but by turning toward the event it is trying to complete. This is not a call back to love. It is the body's call for witnessing, because once the memory is seen, fully, gently, somatically, it no longer needs to disguise itself as destiny. And the dream that kept repeating can finally end differently. Some memories do not leave through time. They leave through ritual. Not ritual in the ceremonial sense, but in the sacred act of turning inward, of becoming still enough to hear what the body never had the safety to say. There is a moment when thought becomes breath, when grief becomes sensation, when the image of them begins to soften, not because it disappears, but because its charge begins to release. This is where the body becomes altar, not for closure, but for witnessing. Not to erase, but to honor the weight that was carried alone. The nervous system stores energy in places without words, in the throat that never spoke what it needed, in the chest that braced for rejection, in the stomach that held back emotion like a dam. To begin releasing their energy is not to let go of them. It is to return to the place where you were last holding yourself, Bruce Lipton teaches that cellular memory can be transformed, not through effort, but through signal, through intention, through new emotional imprinting that speaks the language of the body. So the invitation is simple, not an instruction, but an opening. Where do you feel them now? What part of your body still carries the memory of their presence? Not as thought, but as tension, as heat, as absence. Bring breath there, not to force anything, but to listen. Ask the memory within that place gently. What moment got trapped here? Wait for the image, or the sensation, or even just the silence that says, yes, here is where I was left alone. Now, imagine returning to that moment, not to change it, but to arrive, to place your own hand on your shoulder, to whisper to the part of you who froze, you can release this now. You're safe. No loud declarations, no dramatic releases, just a quiet exhale, like finally breathing out a sentence you didn't know you were still holding. This is not forgetting. This is not erasing. This is re-entering your own field. And slowly calling your soul back to the body it never left, but silenced in grief. When the energy clears, you may still remember them, but you will no longer carry them. This was never madness. It was memory, stored not in words, but in breath, not in logic, but in the tissue of your being. What you've been calling obsession may have been the body's final attempt to finish something it was never allowed to complete. The thought of them wasn't failure. It was the echo of a nervous system still waiting for safety. You were not weak for spiraling. You were mid-flight, suspended in a moment where love, silence, and loss collided, and your body had no map for how to land. They live in your nervous system because your system was never given the chance to release what it absorbed. And that release doesn't come through forgetting. It comes through witnessing, through naming, through the kind of presence that doesn't rush grief, but kneels beside it. Carl Jung wrote, "The soul demands to be lived in its fullness, or else it returns through suffering. Suffering not as punishment, but as a summons, a whisper from the forgotten self." And Bruce Lipton reminds us that every experience, every belief, lives within the body's cellular intelligence. This means that when someone lingers, it may not be because they were your missing half. It may be because they activated a place within you that still waits to be held by you. And healing is not a gate you pass through. It's the gentle returning to the place where your body was left alone, not to rescue it, but to say, "I'm here now." And in that presence, what once felt like fate begins to dissolve into understanding.